Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. While we wait for everyone to join the room, if you could just put where you're joining us from in the chat, that would be great. We love to see where our audience is coming from and connect with each other. All right, thank you for joining us tonight for I believe it's our 15th town hall now. It's crazy how much this has evolved, so thank you all so much for being here with us tonight. I'm just going to quickly go over some Zoom functions. We do ask that at this meeting, we emphasize that BIPOC only voices use the unmute function to talk into the Zoom meeting. We ask that if you are a white ally, that you interact with the meeting through the chat functions. If you are looking at a computer desktop Zoom screen, the mute and stop video buttons are at the bottom of the left-hand corner. The chat should be towards the middle of the Zoom screen. We do have live transcripts on, so towards the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the live transcript, the hide subtitles if you don't want to view it or view the full transcript. And last but not least, reactions. We do encourage reactions. So if you want to, give some hand clapping, thumbs up, a heart, that's all at the bottom of the right-hand screen as well. And now I'm going to pass it over to Sam and Seth.
Good evening. My name is Sam Fletcher, and I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Chapter of NASW. And Seth and I always do a land acknowledgement at the beginning. I am a member of the Cherokee Nation. And Seth, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Seth. I'm 20 years old. I'm a member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribe. And my native name is Firewolf.
And so Seth and I usually talk a little bit about culture, and then we talk about the land. But tonight we're focused on what happens when the moment ends and we're back into the racial justice movement. And we were just going to talk very briefly about, we've been in a moment since George Floyd in May 2020, and now we're seeing that the moment's kind of ending. And one thing we always talk about at the chapter, we talk about at our house, the racial justice movement has been around for hundreds of years. My people did not roll over and die starting in 1492. They fought. Seth's people did the same. We come from warrior people who fought and still fight to this day. Our people fight for land, for our ancestral land. That's always at the top of our list, is to be given back our ancestral land. We fight for the sovereignty of our tribes. Each tribe is a sovereign nation, and we fight to have true sovereignty that does not have any control of the federal government. We fight that our missing people, specifically our missing women, are given the same resources as white women are given. And we fight for our children to stay in the tribe, or to stay within a tribe or native tribe somewhere. So we just want to point out that the racial justice movement has been around for hundreds of years here, ever since the genocide of our people and the enslavement of Black people. And we will continue working on this movement. And some of you may have heard of a land acknowledgement. When you go to certain events, people are doing that more and more. And it's where you acknowledge the original guardians of the land that you are on. We are on the Mohawk land, Seth and I, and we acknowledge the Mohawk people, and we respect the Mohawk people. And as Native people, we are intrinsically tied to the land. I say that it's almost like a Bible with a Christian. The land is very sacred to Native people. Do you want to talk about what the land does for you and how you relate to the land?
It does for me. It means a lot. It's relaxing. I find it peaceful. To be honest, I usually like to go out, and with my mom, we like to go kayaking together whenever we get the chance. And so to me, it's just something that I enjoy doing a lot. So I find it to me relaxing and calming. So yeah.
Very good, Seth. Okay, we will hand it back over to you, Olivia.
Thank you so much, Sam and Seth. That was amazing. I do have one quick announcement before we get started on our grounding. So in the new year, the upcoming new year, we will be revamping our Revolutionized Social Work groups. The work groups were started over the summer, and they are researching schools of social work. So the field placements, policies, anything that has to do with school social work. We created work groups for this mission to kind of create a more just profession in the future. We are recruiting an intern to help us with this research, but if you are a student looking for an independent study, or maybe a faculty member who is interested in doing the research with us, I'm going to be putting a link in the chat in a couple minutes when I'm done speaking, and it's going to be a Google form. If you could fill out your email, and we will be in touch with you. We appreciate it, and we will be sending out more information on that shortly. I'm now going to pass it over to Cecily to give our grounding for tonight.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Good evening, everyone. I'm Cecily. It is always just so grateful to be in this space and to be with you all. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So we're going to do a little, just some grounding before we get started in our conversation. As Olivia said in the beginning, this really is a space where we're centering the voices of BIPOC participants. So we do encourage BIPOC participants to, unmute themselves. They can share in the chat as well, but really want to hear their voices sharing their stories. We ask that white participants listen. So we are centering the voices of BIPOC participants, and white participants, you can absolutely feel free to write into the chat, but also just encourage you to listen. This is that space. There are other spaces which we have where, there's multiple dialogues happening. And want to say also that this is a space of discomfort. And anytime we're having conversations about race, anytime we're having conversations about these topics, they can be a little uncomfortable. And so we encourage you to lean into discomfort, embracing it as an area for growth. Also, as this can be a little uncomfortable, we do encourage you to take care of yourself however that looks for you. So if you need to step away, I know if you need to turn off your screen, that's fine. If you need to step away, take a break, whatever you need to do, totally fine. We do encourage you to take care of yourself. The other piece that I want to say is about confidentiality. We do share stories, right? Sometimes very personal stories. We do not want to share names of agencies, supervisors, colleagues. I think that goes without saying, but just to reiterate that, for the protection of yourself and others. So again, reiterating confidentiality. And we do ask that when you leave, you're taking the stories with you, but you're not taking the, like names of things, but you're really just thinking about the themes. And I mentioned this, some of what we may talk about this evening may trigger you. So I encourage you to pay attention and be attuned to when you're becoming triggered, when you want to react, what's happening, and really take out time for yourself and understand what's happening, and just engage in the dialogue, however works for you. Again, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to our facilitators. We have Rox and Randy, who will be facilitating tonight, as well as Olivia, myself. And we also have a new member. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Zephyr?
Zephyr.
Zephyr, so sorry about that.
That's okay,
yes.
that's all right, thank you
So
for
I wanted
asking.
to, yes. So I'm gonna turn it over to them, and then they can get us started.
Thank you so much, Cecily. So just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Olivia Knox. I am currently a student in my Master's of Social Work program, and I work for the Communications Associate for the New York State chapter. I'm going to turn it over to Randy to introduce himself to us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Randy Ficklin. I'm in School of Social Welfare Master's Program. Currently working at the Nassau County Juvenile Detention Center.
Thank you, Randy. Rox, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Rox. I'm currently studying for my MSW as well, and I also am an intern at the chapter.
Thank you. And who wants to go next? Cecily or Zephyr?
I can hop on. Hey everyone, I'm Zephyr. I am a social worker and a therapist. I work at cases in Brooklyn, which is the Center for Alternative Sentencing and Education Services. So I'm a therapist at an Alternatives to Incarceration program, and I'm also a recent graduate of Silberman School of Social Work with my MSW earlier this year. So not currently a student, but very fresh out of that experience. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you. And last but not least, Cecily.
Thank you. And I just realized, yeah, I did not formally introduce myself when I went into the grounding. So I am Cecily Mitchell Harper. I cannot believe, is this our 15th town hall? Wow. I have been with Revolutionize and have been working very closely with this team since the beginning, really, August 2020. Can't believe that. I am a licensed social worker. I'm a facilitator and a coach and a consultant and strategic advisor. Really, really grateful to be here as always. These spaces, they just do something for me. And so I just really always appreciate being part of these spaces. And so thank you, welcome.
Thank you. So I will pose our first prompt for tonight. So what has sustaining the movement look like for you at your school, at your place of employment? And is it performative? Do you feel that it's performative, or is it more authentic?
It took me a hot minute to think about it. I will admit it's a hard question, so my thoughts are loosely formed. I feel like well, now I'm licensed. I recently passed my licensing exam, so now I'm a licensed social worker. So fun, working as a therapist in the Capital Region in New York. The work that I do is primarily with queer trans folks, and I like to focus a lot on racially marginalized folks, which, by the way, is language that I've been changing to. Normally I use like BIPOC or POC or something like that, but I've been trying to make an intentional language change, and I feel good about it so far, but I don't know community-wise how we feel about it, but I'm using racially marginalized, which I can explain later. It's a little off topic, but sustaining the movement for me as a social worker is like almost a little bit twofold, right? Like part of, I feel like my action is uplifting my clients, especially my clients where much of our conversation is about race and white supremacy and liberation from those things. And I understand as a therapist that I can't actually get rid of capitalism and racism and white supremacy and all of this, and et cetera, but I can work towards like the individual empowerment of folks towards liberation. And I think as social workers, especially folks who work individually, it's important to remember that we can make individual progress, and sometimes it feels small, but I try to really hold on to that, especially at least in my work. A lot of it is individual and not like system based. And then the other thing is trying to make essentially everything in my life as much as I can as active as possible when it comes to certain things. Like I have a whole white side of my family who's like not active, but thinks that they're like not racist, like those kind of people. So I like actively send them things. And that is when I almost feel like it's performative, just because they don't do shit. And it's so frustrating. And it almost feels like people who, when you try so hard, and I'm like, oh, look, it's Juneteenth. What does this mean? Why are you, my white aunt was like, just a rant. She was like, when are we gonna have Juneteenth decorations out in Party City. I wanted to put a wreath on my door. And I was like, whoa, back up, let's hold on. So we have these conversations. But those small interactions do feel almost performative sometimes because they don't go anywhere, because I know that the people I'm talking, which is why for my own sanity, instead of doing work with white people, which I have done my whole life, like that's the work that I did since I was like a small human realizing racism existed. I have been doing work focused on the empowerment and joy of other racially marginalized people. And that to me doesn't feel performative, that feels valuable. And luckily as a social worker, I feel like I now have the legitimate backing of the social institution. Like I'm a licensed therapist kind of thing where I can do that, but there are so many ways in my life that it's not required to be a licensed therapist to do that, I guess. So essentially what I'm saying is I'm really discouraged with the work that I'm doing with white people, but I am really integrated in the work I'm doing with abolition and collectives like that are surrounded with other racially marginalized folks. So I try to do those things. So that was a long-winded way of saying that I am both really discouraged and really heartwarmed, depending on who I am working with.
I think that's a great answer, and I can definitely relate to that. It does depend who you're working with and if they are willing to put in that effort to make authentic change rather than just performative change. And I also think you bring up a great point. When we think of change, we think of systems and seeing the change happen, but it can be just at an individual level, you creating the change at an individual level. So thank you, Felix, for getting us started tonight.
If I can, as a quote just actually came to me, I probably shared this in a previous town hall. When we think about, change and systemic change, or is that, if I'm not doing systemic change, systems level, how meaningful is that? And a quote just came to me, which I actually stick to in my own life is, sometimes revolutions don't happen on the grand stage. Sometimes they are just small pockets of people coming together to do things differently. And so I just wanted to uplift that for us here. When we think, sometimes for me, when I think of change and sustaining this movement, I feel it has to be big, it has to be on the grand stage. But then it's just the little things that may seem little, but they're actually really powerful. When just coming together in this space to have this conversation, that's part of sustaining the movement. So I just wanted to share that. That's from an activist and scholar, Valerie Kaur, who's actually someone who deeply inspires me. I'm very inspired by their work. So wanted to share that. I think I may have botched it a little bit because I don't have the actual quote in front of me, but I remind myself of it daily. Thank you, Felix. Always appreciate what you share.
I also would just, and thank you, Felix, for everything that you shared. A lot of it resonated with me. And one of the things that's coming up for me is even how we define and unpack these terms, right? Because they're so ubiquitous right now, this idea of performativity versus authenticity, and what does that mean? And I think that there are some shared understandings, absolutely, but I also think it's helpful, and even to Cecily's point, right, of thinking about what sort of what does transformative action look like? What can it look like? What are those possibilities? And how do we know the difference between when something is performative versus when something is authentic? And what does that look like for us? How would we know? I think a lot of times for me, I'll share briefly, but I would love to hear from folks in the room. When something rings true, what does that look like? What does that feel like? When it feels like it's coming from a place of authenticity versus when it feels like it's not, when it feels like it's being performed. And I would say, I think for me, that authenticity piece is so key on every level, right? Because when we're talking about this sort of structural, changes that can happen on a micro level, on a meso level, on a macro level. I know in my program, we talked a lot about those three sort of planes of work. That as I think that there's a certain overwhelm, at least that I know I can feel when I start thinking about things on a very big structural level. And that overwhelm can lead to a pessimism. And that pessimism, there's sort of the system and the status quo relies on that pessimism for us to not stay engaged with the work. And so, you know, to me, that connects to this idea of authenticity, because authenticity, when the work feels authentic, regardless of where it's happening, it's invigorating, it's exciting. When it feels performative, I feel drained and I feel tired and I feel pessimistic. And so I struggle with that. And I would just, you know, would really welcome people, even if it's hard to think of an example of exactly what that's looking like in your organizations or in your places of work or in your places of school, even in your interpersonal interactions, like whatever level. How do you know when it's real, or how do you know when it's not? And what does that mean to you when you encounter it?
Oh, excuse me. This is Robert. I'm calling from California. It's good seeing a lot of you people again. So recently after the town hall we had previously. I'm a little late to the party, and could somebody bring me up to speed of what the topic of discussion is?
Yes, sure. So thank you for joining us. The topic of discussion for tonight is how are we sustaining the movement? You know, the Black Lives Matter movement. Is it our organizations, places of employment, et cetera, schools, are they being performative with their actions, or is it truly for authentic change? And we just got started, so you didn't miss too much. And Zephyr just posed the question, how do you know what's the difference if it's performative or authentic? And I do want to remind folks that BIPOC folks, please feel free to just unmute and start sharing with us. And white folks, can you please type in the chat? Also, if you are able to turn on your camera, that would be lovely. It can be pretty intimidating sharing experiences to people you don't know, especially when you're just seeing names. So that would be appreciated.
Hi, my name is Tyree. I have two little kids running around, so I will be turning my camera off just to not be distracting. You know, to answer your question, how do you know it's performative or genuine? I honestly believe that opportunity is a big factor in determining if it's just performative or genuine. You know, I work in a hospital, a large hospital organization in New York, and I'm part of a task force that is allegedly supposed to be addressing the anti-racism issues within the organization. And after about several months of bringing up legitimate and valid and concrete solutions, it's been a bit frustrating to see the pushback on things with opportunity. One of the things has been the reality that our organization sets a high standard for social workers to have a clinical license in order to really access a lot of the opportunity within the organization. And unfortunately, a lot of the BIPOC staff are able to reach the level of L, but struggle, whether it's finances, whether it's capacity to take the test, timing, you know, so many psychosocial issues and barriers that contribute to not being able to just access this particular licensure. And as a result, there's this overwhelming disparity between ethnicities on who has opportunity, who has their C versus who has their L. And so this is one of the things that we've addressed. We don't know why the organization has such a high standard where most organizations don't in the country. And kind of the feedback that we got when we brought it to their attention was, we'll discuss it. All right. And so, you know, that response is kind of the thing that kind of validates the feeling as, you know, is this something that you're trying to do because you don't want a liability suit, or is this something that you really want to address, right? You know, so that's kind of what my own experience has been.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tyree. As you were typing, Felix wrote in the chat, just kind of agreeing with you, and they mentioned task forces are where social action dies. So yeah, task forces, they can be really great, or they can just be kind of like a stallment. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And to that point about task forces, both comments are so much in that, but to that point about task forces can also oftentimes be a way to shift labor onto the part of people who are most affected by these issues, who are most marginalized. And so a task force or a committee is a great way to say, oh, you care about this issue? Here, go and fix it for us for extra work, further labor, without compensation oftentimes. And even when it is compensated, there really begs this question of sort of whose responsibility is it to address these harms, to resolve these harms, and to prevent future harm? Where does that responsibility lie?
That's a great point. Thank you for sharing. Robert, I see your hands up.
Yeah, let me go ahead and take it down now. To that end, you were saying earlier that we was talking about stuff like Black Lives Matter and other social justice groups. The problem with that is more often than not, there are other groups like, like the Tea Party, like other conservative groups turn things around and make our groups seem like they're reactionary, that they're socialists, that they are anti-American. Because when Black Lives Matter first came out, it was a good thing. But what they did in reaction to that is that, okay, you guys think your lives are more important than our lives, and so therefore all lives matter. Or people start coming up with white lives matter, or Chinese lives matter. And that's not what we said. Maybe we should have said Black Lives Matter too, for the people who wanted to try to twist things around because of people being shot down like dogs in the street, or people being people. I was saying people that look like me disproportionately are in a correctional system, and a lot of times those people who are locked up are not guilty of the crime they were accused of. And two prime examples, they're both deceased now, unfortunately, was Reuben Hurricane Carter and Elmer Geronimo Pratt. Now, everybody knows Reuben Hurricane Carter. He was a boxer, prize fighter. He was accused of killing two white people in Pennsylvania in the 1960s, I think it was. He spent like about 30 years in prison on trumped-up charges before it was discovered that it wasn't him, it wasn't the same car, it wasn't the same people, and he was finally released. And so he did what I would have done. He relocated to Canada and lived out his days in Canada. With Geronimo Pratt, he was accused of murdering a teacher. And he spent a number of years in prison before somebody figured it out that somebody was doing some serious lying, and they demonized him to death. And I still haven't figured out, how can you say that Geronimo Pratt murdered a teacher in Los Angeles when he was in San Francisco at the time of the murder? So he was finally exonerated and he moved to Ghana. So some people take extreme measures whenever they're accused of something, and when they get exonerated, they move. And like I said, Black Lives Matter, the Wall Street thing that came out back in 2000. What was the name of what was the name of the Wall Street thing? It was a group of white people that was calling attention to these hedge funds managers that were robbing everybody blind. And
Occupy Wall Street, the
Occupy Wall
movement.
Street, thank you.
Yeah.
And you saw what they did with them, right? They turned into a bunch of degenerates that were raping people and causing all kind of problems, everything else like that. Now, this is true, well, it's true, some of them were doing that. Everybody wasn't doing that. And that's the problem with some of these social movement groups. And not only now, but even back when Dr. King was marching, they were trying to demonize him, and FBI was wiretapping him and all the other people, and coming up with this outlandish claims, stuff that he was doing, and calling him a communist and so on and so forth. And that's the problem with social groups. Hopefully, I explained myself sufficiently.
Thank you so much for sharing, Robert.
Yeah, I know.
sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think you bring up also an important point of like beyond being performative, that oftentimes in these movements, like things will be intentionally done to steer the movement to make it seem more like vile and like negative than like what it is. And I think you even find this in like social work education as well, where you will have students like speaking up, or like faculty and professors, and then they get fired, or they are blacklisted, or they are, all these things are done to them in repercussions of standing up for these like liberation movements to move, the torch forward, whatever you want to call it, it forward. And it's like the system, folks work so hard to tear us like away from that and like kind of deter the movement. So it's like, even beyond things that are performative, there are things that are just like outright destroying movements, and just kind of reminded me of like Sam Cooke, of like how they villainized him as well. And then like come to find out he didn't do what they said he did. And like, there's several examples. There's so many people who like, they will destroy and kill and do all these things to kind of, it makes it almost impossible to sustain this movement to really, kind of attain justice. So just wanted to say thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is like definitely an important element to it.
Thank you so much. I believe Andres had his hand up first.
Thank you, Olivia. My name is Andres. I'm a social worker in West Palm Beach, Florida, by way of New York City. So I grew up and was raised in New York City in Brooklyn, and have been living down here for about 15 years. So we have a huge, I don't know, let's call it a movement, but an awareness going on. It's called ATM, Advancing the Mission. And so, when I saw this topic today, I've been on a couple of meetings with you guys, and I love them. I just transport back to New York, like that's where my roots are. But I can't always get on them. So when I saw this one today, I said, okay, I've got to get on, because I also have a white colleague on, and I know she's listening intensely to get in as much as she can. But we are part of a group here at the organization. So I work for an organization. We have about 70 employees here, social workers and case managers. And we were entrusted by the county, by Palm Beach County, to advance the mission, ATM, right? So to root out racism within our organization, but also to promote healing within our organization. And so there are three or four different levels, where you can adamantly and accurately say we are nowhere near this, or we are getting there. We are pretty good in terms of what we're doing. And then, those that are maybe further along. So My organization that I work for is at about a 2, so we are absolutely getting there. 100% of our staff attended Racial Equity Institute training for 2 days. 100% of our staff. No other organization could say that in our area, I believe. And now we're taking on this. I was part of the Latinx Challenge, so I completed that, and I'm bringing that into the organization. And we are now going to, so that's what we're doing within our organization. We are now going to set up a statement for our organization and then start training or introducing how we can change the way we do business, how we can change the way that we work with our clients. But more importantly, as an organization, our CEO is a LCSW. I am the Chief Operating Officer. I am an LCSW as well. Our senior staff, senior leaders are social workers, and we're there. We're there to make change. We're there to help promote these changes and to bring it into our organization. And then also, more importantly, to promote healing if there was any hurt caused by racism within our organization, to help start promoting that healing process.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was all so great. Something that you said really stuck out to me. I loved that your organization had trainings before making a statement. I think that all institutions, they were so quick to put out statements and not even look into what those statements really meant in their organizations. So I really applaud you for, doing the work first and then putting out a statement. So that really shows that it's not just performative. So thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciated that. I believe that Danielle had their hand up next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Danielle. Sorry for not turning my camera on. I just can't look at another thing. Sorry about that. But I want to speak about what I see or what I've seen, especially in agencies that I've worked for. Coming from the South, a lot of the work has just been performative, and after maybe something happens, something terrible happens, George Floyd, a murder happens, and then people are up in arms and people are upset. And so an agency will come out and they'll make this strong statement about being anti-racist, fighting racism, and then all of those things. And then maybe a few months later, when people of color have calmed down, I've noticed that the work literally stops. Like as soon as people are back to normal and people are not talking about it around the water cooler or around the coffee pot, the work just seems to stop and no one ever wants to go back and pick it up. Do you know what I mean? And then there are all of these, I don't want to say impromptu, but like impromptu DEI trainings and things that are supposed to make the work continue, but I have not seen a continuation. And that's very frustrating. Do you know what I mean? It's like as soon as people are calm or people think that you're calm, we can back off and go back to business as usual. And I have not seen the movement being sustained at all. So I was very happy to see this because I want to know how to kind of keep that ball rolling, keep that fire, keep people anxious and moving forward and doing things. But I've not been able to see that or understand how to do that up to this point.
I definitely agree. In my own personal life, even on like social media over the summer, it was very prevalent that once, Black folks stopped speaking so much on the topic, then everyone else followed suit and kind of felt like, okay, our work here is done. But that's definitely not the case. So thank you so much for sharing, Danielle. Mimi, your hand was up next.
Hello. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So I'm literally on vacation in Puerto Rico, but I'm like, even on vacation, I'm not going to miss these town halls.
That's amazing. Thank you.
So I wanted to say, so I'm in my DSW program, and it was something that really stood out to me for one of the assignments that I had to do. And the assignment was talking about systems. So I had to look at something from a macro level, and it talked about the homeostases of systems. And it made me think about racism. So actually I was talking about personality disorders, in particular narcissism. and how it plays out in a family system. And so when you're working with one person, so everybody in that system, even if it's racism, they have to maintain homeostasis, because when homeostasis is lost in any system, it creates dissonance in the entire system. And so when you think about racism as a system that has to maintain homeostasis, this is why it never completely changes, because it's a system. It's beyond a belief, because it's actually a system that functions. It's in policies, it's in procedures. It's just a way of being. And when I thought about how systems have to maintain their homeostasis to function, I thought about racism, because we wonder, well, why is there always so much pushback? Well, let's think about the system. Which one is easier? Is it easier for the system to be uncomfortable, or is it easier to push the person out of the system? Because in order for the system to change, the system first has to acknowledge that there is dysfunction, or there is like toxicity within the system. And just like even with a personality disorder, that's really what, to me, it just reminds me of how on a macro level, it looks the same way played out on a familial level. And so many times, like let's say you have a family, and let's say a parent is, displaying NPD. The entire system functions around this one particular person. And usually someone gets scapegoated, the person that raises their hand, like, oh, this is wrong, or maybe we should do it like this. Well, that creates an injury to the system, and that system would rather push out that one person or the two people within that familial system, because it has to maintain homeostasis. And yeah, I'm telling you, when I read that, I was like, this is what we're dealing with. But it's on a larger scale. And it's like, well, we can't, like when they talked about, like, do we consider racism to be a mental health disorder? Well, you can't, because it's like on a large, it's multiple, it's a system, but it is a shared delusion. It's a belief system that is faulty, but that system also has to maintain homeostasis in order for it to continue to function. And this is why when you have people in organizations that may say something about a racist thing that happened, that organization, if not conscious or ready to do that inner work about the action that happened, they'll scapegoat that person. They will falsify reports. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of us have seen it to some degree or another. But what it is it's not just about targeting that one person. It literally is about this system trying to maintain their homeostasis at all costs. So because they're it's like survival mode. And if you've ever dealt with a client that has been diagnosed with NPD, they literally feel like they're being literally attacked, because that is their defense mechanism is to get rid of whatever is causing them that uncomfortability, because they're not able to deal with reality. It's a delusion. So I just thought that was interesting. And like I said, when I came across the literature about the homeostasis and systems, it just made me think about, how racism plays itself out in organizations.
Mimi, is that how you pronounce your name?
It is.
Ah, okay. Yes. Well, I think, you just got really blown up in the chat. People love, and I just have to say, thank you so much. You're just really brilliant. Breakdown and parallel, right? It just, as you were speaking, I was like, oh my gosh, this makes total sense. And especially, I think when we think about performative versus authentic change, why sometimes it just leaves at the performative is because when it becomes difficult and uncomfortable, yeah, it creates dissonance, right? And so the system is always, and we are all operating within the system, which is pathological, which is unhealthy, which is toxic, right? And we're all operating within it. The system is always, as you said, going to try to maintain homeostasis. So when it becomes uncomfortable, when we have these task force, when we have these groups that are happening, and it starts creating some, oh no, I'm getting triggered. Oh no, I don't like this. You're calling me out of my stuff? No, I don't like that. No, I have to give up some power? No, I don't like that. Then we're going to do whatever we can to be able to maintain. And that's the thing. That's why when you put it like that, it's like, yes, when we think about performative versus authentic change, what's preventing? Where's that stop before it gets to authentic? Authenticity means, okay, you know what? We all have something in some ways to lose here. We all have something to gain. Like I would say, like, you know, because the system is unhealthy and toxic. It doesn't work for any of us. And it certainly doesn't work for racially marginalized folks. So thank you so much for that. And I do see some other hands up. I see Latanya, I think you had your hand up, and also Dr. Yolanda Johnson.
The only thing I wanted to share, thank you. The only thing I wanted to share, as I sit here and I listen to our conversations and our town halls that we've had, you know, I'll look for a day when we don't need to have diversity and inclusion or groups in different organizations. I look forward to a day where we're not sitting on a screen or gathering together to continue to talk about issues that are involving, you know, melanic individuals who are marginalized. I look forward to the day where we don't have to talk about people being judged because of how they look or how they wear their hair. You know, I'm tired, and I'm sure all of the melanic individuals who are on this call are tired of repeating the same things, saying the same things, fighting the same fights in different ways and different times. You know, we've been fighting this fight since our ancestors have landed here as a stolen group of people, and you know, people still don't get it. And and yes, it's because folks don't want to get it. It's comfortable not to get it. It's comfortable to keep things status quo. It's comfortable to keep things in homeostasis. And people always ask, well, what can we do and how can we help? I get tired of hearing that too. You know what? Do your homework. Do your homework. How do you think melanic individuals survived for so long? We didn't ask you what we could do to make your lives better. We watched what happened and we made things so that life would be easier on us because we were the people that had to, you know, ultimately provide the service or, you know, or be in service or be enslaved. We observed things and we made adjustments according to those things. Do your homework. There's a plethora of individuals that you can look at these days and go, that doesn't seem right. There have been books written by brilliant people that you can pick up. If you don't know where they are, Google's your best friend. But I get tired of pacifying people and people wanting to be pacified because they refuse to do the work. You can't be an ally unless we deem you an ally. Can't deem you an ally unless you're willing to do the work. Do the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Just do the work. Dr. Yolanda Johnson, you had your hand up next.
Sorry, guys, I can't turn my camera on. I'm not looking presentable, and I still have some clients after. But just listening to everyone, I'm sitting here in tears because it's so real, it's so true. It's the big white elephant in the room. For me, it's white privilege. And if we can call it out and speak the truth and stop trying to cover things up, I believe that the world could just in general could be better. I'm just like the lady who just spoke. I'm so tired of having to fight and continue to stand for what is right. I don't know if everybody on here know my story. You know, this is my second time, zooming in with this. I was scheduled to graduate May 12th of this year, and I was sabotaged by a university. The majority of white people when there was only one Black instructor, no diversity, because I stood up and asked for feedback And that feedback just turned into a nightmare. Everything that I worked for, my license, I can't have now. I have to go to another school to start over. So for me, I'm just in a constant battle like, oh my God, Lord, what am I supposed to do? I was courageous. I stood up. You know, it's just like somebody had said earlier, the young man was speaking about, you know, George Floyd. When that happened, I mean, it's just like everybody, oh my God, you know, oh. And then after he went in the ground, everybody just closed their eyes. Oh, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. But the reality of it is a big deal. It is a very big deal. If we can just stop with the white privilege and address the issues, what really need to be addressed. And no offense to nobody on the call, white women, oh, I'm threatened, or this happened to me, the lady in the park, you know, it's sad. It's very sad. It's sad because the woman who did this to me was a LCSW. She was an adjunct instructor. And now on my official transcript, I have an F for the first time in history because of something that she did that I stood up for that was right. She could not handle me being direct. Okay, I'm paying for these courses, so I need my feedback. She didn't like it when I told her, you are trying to oppress me. You're trying to hold me down. And guess what she did, the reality? She held me down. And everything that I worked for was sabotaged because of a white adjunct instructor who taught a course for the second time in history. What do we do? How do we change these systems? How do we make it balanced for all of these young Black men and Black women that's coming up who might want to be a master social worker or LCSW? What do we do? What do we do? Because I know I'm tired. I'm past tired. I'm still in the fight. I'm trying to figure out where am I going to go to finish, because remind you, I'm at the finish line. Nobody want to accept all of my credits of everything that I done worked for because of a white woman that was privileged and could get away with what she did, and they backed her up. Just because she's white, they knew she was wrong. Black boy will not lie. If there was feedback, Black boy will be able to show that there was feedback. There was no feedback until 3 weeks before the semester ended, but they stood with her because she was white and she was privileged. I opened my mouth and they sabotaged me. It's sad, it's sickening, and I'm tired. That's why I wanted to join in, and I want to just do as much as I can, because I'm a mother at the end of the beginning of the day. I'm still a mother, and I have children that I have to raise to stand up and do what's right. So when you stand up and do what's right, you are sabotaged, especially if you're Black. That's all I have. And I'm going to continue to shed my tears, and I'm going to continue to join in with y'all, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep this fight going until change comes. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, what's your name again, ma'am? Hello?
My name is Dr. Yolanda Johnson.
How you doing, Yolanda Johnson? Thank you for sharing. My name is Randy Fickler. You really touched me with that spiel you gave, and I just wanted to, share with you that the struggle continues, and we must not give up. We must not give up with the fight of change this racist system, and we also got to understand that Audre Lorde said the revolution is not a one-time event. And it seems like, according to your story, that it was a little bit of tone policing going on, as well as white silence that was taking place within your process at your school. And we must understand that, to begin to heal and move toward real racial justice, we must address not only the harms of the past 4 years, but also the harms tracing back to our country's origin. This has been going on for years, months, and days, and racism has played an active role in the creation of our systems, in our education, healthcare, our ownership, our employment, and virtually every other facet of life, you know, that Blacks has been involved in. So we must not give up the fight. We must keep pushing forward. We must play our position, and we must put forth the truth, our love, and our commitment to make change. And by having these town halls meetings and sharing and coming together for one common cause, a unification and righteousness, change will come. But we must take it one step at a time. I know you're tired. I'm tired. I know we all are tired. But coming together like this and sharing our stories and trying to come up with a solution, I believe change will come sooner than later. And thank you for sharing.
I also, I see some, sorry, I see some hands up, and I just very quickly wanted to, Dr. Yolanda, we met at the last meeting and your story touched me a lot tonight as well. And I just wanted to say that as much as your story resonates with me and I hear you, and can only imagine what you have gone through, I also know that if you were not nearly as brilliant and powerful as you are, they would not have to work as hard to keep you silenced, to keep you out of these systems. And I want to point that out because I want to uplift you. I also want to say that whether that's true for you, it's true for us as a community. And I thank Randy for the point that he brought up as well. And one of the things that we learn a lot, at least in my social work program, the antidote to stress and to burnout is self-care. And what's not talked about is self-care in the form of community care. And what could this community care look like when you are tired? Yes, we can relate to being tired, but we also can hold each other up and we can uplift one another and we can continue this fight collectively, but only if we engage in that level of community care. So where this white woman is telling you, you know, I'm giving you an F because you're not playing this game or because you refuse to back down to my silencing of you, right? You have your community that can say, you're not the crazy one. You are not the one that's in the wrong here. And so I just want to say thank you for sharing that, and that to the point of what a few people have touched on, you know, this idea of, I love what Mimi had said earlier also about the shared delusion of racism, right? Like what we're talking about is this myth of white supremacy. And it's a myth, but it is so powerful in this narrative of that. The extent to which these systems and those who uphold the system and benefit from the system and benefit from its maintenance have to constantly work hard at preserving that myth, because it is a myth. And what that myth does is it teaches us that we are the ones who are pathological if we don't buy that myth, if we don't support that myth. And so really tapping into this collective strength that we have in this room here and in these spaces, we can remind ourselves that it is a myth, and the power of the collective is far greater than these individuals, but they don't want us to tap into that. But thank you again, Dr. Yolanda, for sharing that, and for everyone in the room tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you both so much. Mimi, I think your hand was up first.
I'm sorry. Hello? Hello?
Yeah,
First, I want to say to Dr. Yolanda, like, I am absolutely, like, it breaks my heart to hear that, especially after you put in all the work. It is painful, you know, and there is a grieving process that you go, like, even though you know you did what was right, you know, and we like to believe in justice and fairness, we do know that sometimes the worst happens, you know, and there's a grieving process when that happens. So I definitely, you know, I'm sending you love and good vibes, and I hope you continue to fight. I don't know if you can peel it or what other avenues you can possibly take. But I definitely understand. It's something similar happened to me when I was in my undergrad program, and even to this day. But see, and I'm not gonna say, because it got to the point with me. I was like, well, if you're gonna try to take it, I'm gonna fight until the end. They're going to drag me up out of here and drag me out with security, because I'm not leaving without, you know, that piece of paper. But I totally get it. It's frustrating and it's very painful. But what I wanted to say was, I think for me, the turning point began to be, so I'm an LSW, and the more I began to deal with or understand narcissism, right? And what it, so like when you're dealing with that person with that grandiose, it's privilege, right? This person has this idea of being superior. Yes. So this person has this idea of being superior. And then everybody around that person pretty much goes into the mode of upholding that false belief system. And for me, when I know that I'm dealing with that way, and I call it a way, when I know I'm in the presence of a person that has that way, right, that belief system, I can sense it. I do what I teach my clients to do. I gray rock. There's no emotion. And I deal with them on the level of just professionalism, real short answers, yes, no. We're not having conversations at the water fountain. I'm very black and white because it reminds me of dealing with clients that have that disorder. And so it's like when you learn how to gray rock a person that has that faulty belief system, that delusional way of thinking, it's like, so you ever hear people say like how do narcissists know who to pick, right? Like how do they know? Because they have an intuitive, they're very sensory oriented, because something usually happened in childhood, right? So they're able to scan their environment and they can pick up on people's feelings, right? So usually like when they know that a person is like really sensitive or they care about something or are passionate about something, they know what button to push in order to get a reaction out of that person. And so the best way that I deal with that when I'm inside of organizations or systems, I just gray rock. I'm very black and white. I used to be one that I would share and, like, oh, it's all Karen and it's all, but the sad part about it is it's not all Karen. And that whole thing got knocked, I'm a social worker. I'm proud to be a social worker. We're all loving, we're all caring, but this is a system, and we understand that we're dealing in a racist system as Black, Indigenous people of color. We are dealing in a system that is oppressing our people. When you gray rock them and you just stick strictly to business, you know what you're coming in there to do, right? You're coming there to change the system. But it's like we have got to do it in such a way that almost you have to be covert. You almost always have to be 10 steps ahead of what they're doing, because you have to understand something. It is a delusion. Like you're not going to sit down with an NPD person and have a rational conversation about why what they're doing is harming other people. They know what they're doing is harming other people. They know that lying is wrong. They know that being manipulative is wrong. But when you're dealing with people that have a delusion, you can't have rational conversations with them because they're not rational. And they will do anything. And we've seen it in history, whether people getting fired, people getting blackballed, people getting killed. This stuff really happens. And when you know what you're dealing with, we as people of color have to deal with it differently. We have got to take our feelings out of the game, completely take your emotions out and put them aside and deal with it as if it's just business. And because you're dealing with something, and I don't think we as a people have truly come to understand the depravity of racism, that it literally can be considered a disorder, because it really is. And when you fully, completely understand that, you deal with that system differently. Like I don't take my feelings. I don't. I have to leave them at home, and I don't take personally what they do, because I understand they're in survival mode. Period. So that was all.
Thank you so much, Mimi. You made some really great points. I just wanted to touch on something you said about, we have to be strategic with this work. I definitely just want to emphasize that. I feel like with every step forward, we might take 3 steps back with this work. But yeah, it can be very exhausting to kind of keep pushing forward, and we are just getting this kind of walls in our face with every step forward. So thank you for sharing. And Robert Brown, I see your hand is up.
Yes, Dr. Johnson, you have our support. I'm pretty sure you already knew that. And there is a grieving a process you can actually fight that. First of all, is she basing that stuff on one particular class or test or whatever the case may have been? Because if you was getting the A's and everything else, and she flunked you from one particular project, she can get herself in a lot of hot water, no matter what color she is. So there's got to be somebody over the person that's above her that you can do the green process. Maybe the director of that particular school of social work, or to go to the dean with it and keep squawking. And I think at one point to shut you up, they're going to reverse that, because even when you get a grade under normal circumstances, they give you 1 semester to petition that to change the grade. If you have the paperwork that goes with it, proving that you unjustly received that grade, they have to remove it from the transcript. And I went through a similar thing, almost went through a similar thing when I was an MSW intern, where I had this particular field supervisor who really had an axe to grind with me, and she kept threatening to not pass me and flunk me and all that kind of stuff. But fortunately for me, I had a real strong support system at the school which I received my MSW. And so therefore, I had my field supervisor come down and meet with her and with her boss. And in the end, she had to leave me alone because I had her dead to rights. I'll give you a perfect example. I was doing internship work at a particular skilled nurse facility, right? And I noticed that this particular nurse was kind of handling this patient real roughly. Like he wound up hitting his head in the back of the railing, and he died about a day later. And I always was taught that being in individual supervision with your field supervisor is supposed to be a safe time for you to discuss concerns that you've seen in the field and so on and so forth. I couldn't wait, so therefore I called her on the phone and told her what I saw. Instead of being supportive and telling me that must have made you feel really bad to notice that that particular person was handled roughly, that patient was handled real roughly by the orderly, her first thing was that you better not say anything to anybody because you're gonna cause us to lose a contract. And when it came down to that, when she was getting ready to try to fail me, and I brought that up to her boss chewed her a new one because I was right. Now, as an intern, I was not obligated mandated reporter, but I found out by doing some digging, and I actually did a presentation in front of all the other people at the agency that although I was not required as a mandated reporter, I did not. I could, if I wanted to, be a mandated reporter. And as a result of that, they kind of made some changes at the agency. So I would say to you, Dr. Johnson, keep on fighting. Keep going as far as you could possibly go. If you had to go to the damn dean of the school with your grievance, do it, because you earned it.
Now, I appreciate it, but I have already went to every level there has been. And once again, they are all white and they all stuck together. So I'm out of there. They have already withdrawn me from the school. There's nothing else I can do.
I also just want to, kind of to that point, or just thinking about this broadly, the choice so many of us are tasked with making in terms of self-preservation in the face of taking up these fights and really making, and speaking in response to this, but not specifically to you, Dr. Yolanda, because I trust that you've made the choices that you felt that were the best choices you could make for yourself through that process. And as Mimi said, sometimes the worst does happen. And I think that but to this like larger conversation about, the burden that we take on as people who are marginalized by these systems, by these oppressive systems, and then also working within them, right? Someone else had quoted Audre Lorde tonight. I love quotes and use them a lot. And, one of Audre Lorde's quotes that I think about and I struggle with a lot is the idea that the master's house cannot be dismantled with using the master's tools. And I struggle with that a lot as a social worker, because what does it mean to work within these systems that many of us have long known are harmful? Some of us have lived experience being harmed by these systems. And yet, if these are the only systems and structures that are currently in place to even fight against these harms, then what do we do to work within them, to dismantle them? Is it possible to change them from within? And at what point do they begin to change us in a way that is no longer sustainable for us? And that is something that, I think before I entered this profession, I was much more judgmental of folks, and I can own that. I can be honest about that. Judgmental of folks who would decide, oh, I'm going to work for this agency or I'm going to work for this place, knowing, that agency might be trying to help people, also might be harmful, right? I used to teach in a juvenile detention center, and I'm very much a prison abolitionist, and I believe in dismantling the prison industrial complex and abolishing it. And yet the people that I met were oftentimes people who worked there, were oftentimes folks who had been directly impacted by the systems in their own lives, and then chose to come back and work there to help the folks, the young people that were also experiencing that they had went through when they were younger. And it changed my perspective around, my ability to judge someone to say, yeah, I'm going to take this paycheck from this horrible system. And yet the intention here is to help sort of support folks going through something that I went through when I was younger and had no one to support me through. And how can we do that at the same time with the overall goal of dismantling them? I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's part of the bigger questions here, while also making a living for yourself and also having a life that's fulfilling, and a life that's not borne down, where you're just worn down constantly by these systems, because the systems will do that to you if you let them. And so, I support anyone in terms of their choices that they have to make to say, you know what, enough of this. I need to take care of myself and find another avenue and another path. But how can we do both? And I don't have an answer. I have more questions than I have answers, but I appreciate all the honest shares tonight. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think, we're all faced with that question and going back and forth of, setting those boundaries for yourself, but also trying to put yourself in the best position for your future. Thank you. Felix, I see your hand is up.
Hi, everybody. I apologize for being this weird, dark, floating head right now. I had to pick up my fiance from work, so we're driving back. I am not driving, just by the way, we're safe. I'm in the passenger seat. But I really, really appreciate the perspective of like safety and harm reduction. Like, we have to remember that social work was founded by racist, classist, white women. And it was not like the social work values that we have today of like social justice, etc. Everything that you can read in the ethics code. Most social workers don't actually follow those things, because otherwise, in my opinion, we would all be abolitionist social workers and we would be an incredibly effective force of change. But unfortunately, social work often is a force of status quo and often ends up doing so much harm, just like Zephyr was saying. So something that I think about a lot is when I was trying to decide what kind of social worker would I be, I am firmly an abolitionist. How do I work in a system that contributes to the carceral system? So I decided I personally could not be a school social worker because that would in my opinion, have to contribute to the school to business pipeline. I couldn't, work in a CPN, etc. But then I realized as a therapist, if I have a client who is suicidal and there's no other option, then I have to somehow figure out how to force them to go to the hospital and force them into involuntary psychiatric hospitalization, which is also carcinoid. So essentially what I'm saying is it's almost impossible to completely stay abolition, because social work was designed to uphold racism and classism and all of the things that I'm actively trying to dismantle. And we can't exist under capitalism and colonialism without also perpetuating it as well, unfortunately. And I think that we have to, as marginalized people, forgive ourselves for that, right? When I think about whether or not it is ethical for me to feel weird about whether or not this one client, I get more money from this one client because of their insurance versus the other client because they're on my sliding scale pay, I have to think about capitalism as my livelihood. When I would, in an ideal world, just be able to treat these people equally, or at least in my head equally, I know that I can't offer every single person my lowest sliding scale rate because then I wouldn't be able to afford my rent. And so us as social workers fighting against the system, we're also burdened by it as well. And I think it's okay for us to make those decisions and forgive ourselves. At least I try really hard to, which is why, as much as I have always run into problems fighting against the system, maybe I'm not that effective about it because I'm aggressive and I'm not palatable and I'm really direct. It just doesn't, I'm not the person that will be professional because I firmly believe we need to dismantle professionalism. What I decided my role is to uplift marginalized people. And I think that always gets forgotten. And the first thing I said in this town hall was talking about uplifting marginalized people. And that is where I really get my juices to keep going because I get uplifted as a marginalized person by creating those spaces. So when we talk about sustaining the movement, we really also have to talk about how do we sustain ourselves. And someone really mentioned community care earlier. I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, but I want to really, really highlight that statement because schools will tell you all about self-care, take care of yourself. And then, of course, force you into really, really demanding high-need jobs that make it impossible to take care of yourself, by the way. But nobody ever talks about community care and what it means to accept love and compassion from the people around you who understand the marginalization that you go through. And that is really, really important to cultivate. And that is why I try really, really hard to focus on that. My goal is not to go to all of the white people in the world and get them to change. Unfortunately, I can't do it. I tried to do it, and it is really just not sustainable for me. It's really unhealthy, actually. But what I can say is that white people, someone else a while ago was saying, white people, read a book, right? They need to do the work. And there are white people in this room listening, right? So, you really have to do that work and be okay with you might be wrong. You cannot just get all of your answers from racially marginalized people because that's not you doing the labor. That's us doing the labor for you so then you can perform it and then feel like a good white person. And I am not in that business, right? You have to do that work, make mistakes, and continue to get better. Well, at least in my opinion, my role is to take care of myself and my communities. And I hope that other folks feel like they can give themselves that grace to also do that, because as social workers, it's not all of us have a savior complex, but we have this obligation to try to fix the world, and it's unfortunately not going to happen on an individual level. So essentially, like, I really think that white people need to step up. And I also say specifically, just to point out, white people as a whole. I will never say some white people or some white women, because that allows white people to hear that and exclude themselves from that group. When I say white people, I'm talking about you. When I say white women, I am talking about you. Always have that obligation to do better. And you will make a mistake, and then you will try harder. At least I hope so, right? I'm using that language as a directive, so to hope that you continue. I am very discouraged, and I said that in the beginning, because of I know so many white people who just don't try, which is why I don't do that work anymore. But again, as like my closing statement, like, we can come together in our own communities to do healing without white people. And that is, it's not complete liberation, but it is joy and resistance. And marginalized joy is so radical, and we need to hang on to that. I firmly believe that we deserve that kind of thing.
Thank you, Felix. There's so much in that share, and really holding on to those words that you shared at the end about, you know, joy, and joy specifically, finding joy in the face of these oppressive systems is radical. It is radical, it is transformative, it is liberatory. It might not be the full arc of liberation in and of itself, but it's just too difficult. Like, that's just, what is the, like, I think about that a lot in terms of like how, and excuse my language, but how fucking depressing and hard this work is without those moments of uplift and of joy and of community. And that is a radical act, and that's really important. And I also, you know, I know we have a few minutes left, and I think also thinking about what does that work look like. I dropped an article in the chat that in case anyone is interested in, but I think a lot specifically to your point about white people needing to do that work amongst their communities and their groups and their spaces. And one of the things that I've, you know, paid attention to over the last year and a half since George Floyd, to bring it, you know, full circle to the beginning of the conversation, is like the rise of this anti-racism, I would say industrial complex. It feels like it's becoming one in and of itself. But it's an industry, it's a very profitable industry. And so lots of books are being written, and a lot of those books give that space. And I don't say this to, I believe it was Latanya earlier. I completely agree with the points that you made, Latanya, earlier, that white people need to do this work. But there's something that's parallel that's happening about the co-opting of like the work and that language to now be a thing where I can buy this book and I can pat myself on the back for being a good white person, and now my job is done. And in some ways, I think that the rise of that has really undermined true liberatory practices. I think it's gotten a lot of like well-meaning white people further away from implicating themselves. And so, you know, I just put that out there that the system is going to be self-serving no matter what. And so thinking how we can, you know, if something's highly profitable under the system of capitalism, it's probably not doing that much to contradict it. So, and I see another hand, I'll pass.
Oh, I'm sorry, Robert. I think you're still muted.
I'll be quick because I know you guys get ready to wrap things up. You know, but here's the thing. The 1619 Project was supposed to go a long way of explaining how we feel we've been treated since 1619 to the current time. And the problem is, even if you do put the work out there for them to read it, instead of reading it, they turn it into a racist thing that, you know, the 1619 Project is a bunch of garbage. They came up with this critical race theory saying that people will be having their children pulled out of class, which is a lie, outright lie. And they keep saying it, and they say it enough where a lot of more people are believing that they're pulling people of color's kids out of class, teaching them to hate white people. That is not it. 1619 Project is about airing all the dirty laundry, because people are sick of this country whitewashing everything. I did not know, I'm embarrassed to say, I did not know about Rosewood until the movie came out with Ving Rhames in it. I didn't know anything about Black Wall Street Massacre until maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. I did not know about the Devil's Punch Bowl, which is down in Mississippi. You guys can read up on that. Whereas at the end of the Civil War, there was a lot of free Black people in Mississippi. Union troops did this, not Confederate troops. Union troops herded people into a particular plot of land that had nothing really you can really grow in, and handed them shovels. And where they dropped is where they were buried. People in the end, near the end, was begging to go back into a system of slavery as opposed to being free and being in a place you couldn't grow anything. They did not want that stuff to be aired to the current people. Somebody put in Facebook, and I say this in close, that people don't, the older white people, some of them don't want to know about them throwing rocks at Ruby Bridges when she was trying to go to school, because they don't want their grandchildren to find out what kind of assholes they were back in the day.
Thank you for sharing, Robert. All right, and that brings us to 7:30, so we are going to start wrapping up tonight. I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, for sharing and chatting with us tonight. I think it's very clear that we do have some work to uplift this movement again when the moment is over. It is all of our responsibilities as social workers to be doing this work and to be doing authentic work. So I hope this town hall was helpful tonight for everyone to listen in and experience. And I will be putting some links in the chat. I will be putting a link to our BIPOC only healing space. So that space was formed from these town halls. It was pretty clear that, us BIPOC folks would like a space to kind of chat and heal with ourselves just from our community. So we hold monthly meetings. I believe it's on the 18th of every month, unless it falls on a weekend. So I'll be sharing that link in the chat. And as well, I just want to remind folks of what I mentioned earlier with the work groups. We do have an intern coming in on the beginning of the year to help us with the research on the work groups, but I will be putting in a Google form link to for any students, if you're interested in an independent study, or even any professors just gaining extra research credit, please feel free to fill out that form with your email, and we will be in contact with you shortly. I'm going to pass it over to Cecily to wrap us up tonight. Thank you all for joining.
Can I say something before you wrap up, please?
Sure.
Hey, I'm the first generation immigrant from Africa, and I heard a lot of guys saying, and I work as a social worker, so a master's social worker. I work with our people, and what I'm lacking or communication issue is we are not communicating. See, if we are strong to support each other, if you are seeing a Black failing, hey, get up, stand up, and if we are not helping, the group we building, it does not go that far. That's why we have to do house cleaning. We have to support each other. If we unite together, we can make it. Instead of us killing each other, hating each other, doing this, doing that, let's stand up and do that homework. we can get there. See what happened from the very beginning from Africa to America. Go back to Africa too. What's going on in Africa too? We just blaming the whites. We have to blame ourselves. We let the whites to tear up Africa, who could have been a strong nation. And here, the same thing. I'm tired of people get killed. I have 3 boys. They are from here. I just tell them to be proud being Black, but it's hard. Let's unite together. I don't hate a white because he's a human being too, but we hate who is bad, who is doing wrong things to a human being. Let's unite as a Black, united as, a human being. Let's focus ourselves to our Black folks. They are not going to school. They are on drugs. They are in crime, this and that. If you guys do the statistics on guns, I did, and out of 67 people, 65 are whites, but 1 Black and 1 Hispanic. I asked 1 Black guy who is my best friend still, where do our people get gun? Oh, come on, Abera. If you go on the street, you can find guns. So let's not hate each other. You see, you have nothing to do with my problems. My problems are my problems. Let's not blame the victim and stand up. This is my saying.
Thank you for sharing with us. Cecily, would you like to wrap us up?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I always feel like I walk away from these town halls with just something. And this town hall was so many themes came out, that some things that I just want to uplift, that I'm leaving this town hall with, and I'm leaving this space with, and I just wanted to uplift it here. First off, thank you so much for everyone who shared. Thank you for sharing from your experience. Thank you for sharing and being vulnerable. It's not easy to have these conversations. It's not easy to put yourself out there. And I just really appreciate those who have spoken, those who have shared from their heart, those who have deeply shared what they've been experiencing. And, to the last point about coming together, this really is part of it, right? Zephyr brought up before about community care. Really, this is a space for community care, moving away from, in social work, we talk about, oh, take care of yourself, self-care, self-care. This change is not going to happen on our own, right? We cannot do this alone. So just want to uplift, and that's one of the themes that I feel like came up repeatedly throughout this conversation, is around us coming together. I shared in the beginning a quote, and I'm actually going to read out the actual quote from Valley Accor, who I said in the beginning was very inspirational for me. Just remembering, revolutions do not happen only in grand moments in public view, but also in small pockets of people coming together to inhabit a new way of being. I see this as one of these small pockets. I see these town halls as one of these small pockets in which we're coming together to inhabit a new way, to have a different type of conversation. And one of the things that I want to say is, we talk about we're fighting against the system. We're fighting and we're tired and we're exhausted. There's that. But I want to encourage us, and this came up before, to think about the energy that we're giving forth, that moving away from the fighting, moving away from the exhaustion, and let's uplift the joy. Let's uplift the resilience. That came up in the conversations many times today. And I want to just uplift that let's, we're dealing with the trauma. We're exhausted. We're tired. We are more than tired. We are beyond tired. Let's focus on the joy. Let's focus on the resilience, uplifting, and knowing that the movement, as Samantha said way in the beginning, this movement has been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is not a new thing. And, Zephyr brought up about, recently, and I would say since George Floyd, and this goes into this performative change piece, a lot of organizations and a lot of spaces, right, are having these, oh, we're going to be anti-racist now. We're going to do DEI work and this, that, and the third. That's all performative. And that's all a way of checking off a box. Unfortunately, a lot of times it is. And so understanding the ways in which now it's been co-opted, as Zephyr said before, the ways it's been co-opted, and it takes away from the fact that this movement has always been happening. This is not a new movement. This is not something that just came about after George Floyd. Remembering that this has always been happening and remembering who has always taken the mantle for this. So I just want us to encourage us to remember that as we leave this space, but also to just uplift community care, uplift resilience, uplift joy, centering resilience, centering empowerment, right? Centering empowerment, knowing that, you know what, we got it. And we're not going to fight against the system. We're going to come together to inhabit a new way of being. That's going to be the change. And so I just wanted to share that. That's what I'm leaving with. And I just wanted to encourage us to leave with that as we exit this space tonight. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Really enjoy these town halls and looking forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Hi,